Okay, so here is your Module 10 review. It has a little bit of all of the different stuff that we've been doing with right triangle trig, which is sine, cosine, and tangent. The first 6 problems, it looks like a whole lot of explanation here, and it is a whole lot of explanation. And unfortunately, this is not a case where lots of words means it's super complicated. I'm trying to show you how easy it is with all these words. My point is, it says give your answer as a fraction and as a decimal. It actually has an extra letter there, sorry, decimal. Anyway, I wanted to make the point that these should be easy. Don't overthink these. And what you should do is for each one of these, you should look at the angle that it says, sine of x. So here's my angle, x is my angle. So I'm tracing the 2 sides of x. Okay, one of those sides is the hypotenuse. It's easy to see on this one, which is the hypotenuse, because the hypotenuse is always the longest side. 9, 40, 41 is the longest side. So this is the hypotenuse. And the other side is always the adjacent. The 2 sides that make up the angle are always the hypotenuse and the adjacent. So that makes this the opposite. And then I have to remember my SOHCAHTOA, that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So I'm going to put the opposite over the hypotenuse. And that's the first part of my answer, because it asks for it as a fraction and then as a decimal. The next part of my answer, be very careful, there's a common error here. Do not press the sine button. Do not press the cosine button. Do not press any buttons like that. You're just changing this number, 40 41sts, to a decimal. So that's just 40 divided by 41, which is 0.975 or about 0.98, because it says to the nearest hundredth. Another way you could do it is you can put it in as a fraction, 40 over 41, and then press the little button above enter that changes it, has little arrows, changes it to a decimal. So you're literally just changing the fraction to a decimal. You're not doing anything different to the triangle. So just remember that throughout all of these. So like on the next one, tangent of x, let me look at the 2 sides of x. This is one side and this is the other side. So the 2 sides of x that I highlighted there in green, one is the 40, one's the 50. The bigger one's always the hypotenuse, so here's the hypotenuse. The other one is the adjacent, and the side across from x would be the opposite. So for tan of x, I'm going to put opposite over adjacent. That comes from TOA. So opposite over adjacent is 30 over 40. Always simplify if you can, and that's 3/4. All right, and then changing 3/4 to a decimal is just going to be 0.75. So you're going to be asked on your quiz to do exactly what this is asking. Give a fraction answer and then a decimal answer. So this is just a matter of identifying which side is which in terms of opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse, and then putting the correct one over the correct one, and simplifying or changing to a decimal. Looking down at 7 and 8, 9, 10, finding the missing side. These are the first ones where you actually have to set up an equation based on those definitions. Remember, these are the definitions basically. Sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. That's the definition of sine. Cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent equals opposite over adjacent. So we're going to use those definitions to write an equation that we can solve to find the missing side length. Remember that since we're finding a side length, there will be none of the inverses. You will not use the things with the negative ones. You will not press the button that says second. Okay, that's only when we're looking for angles. Either way, we start out the same way, which is setting up an equation based on these. So first thing I do is I look at my angle. Here it's 25. It's got 2 sides. One of them's a hypotenuse and one of them's the adjacent. In this case, 11 is the hypotenuse, and x is the adjacent. Okay, so if I'm using hypotenuse and adjacent, I'm going to use cosine, ca. Hypotenuse and adjacent is a and h. So I'm going to set up an equation based on that definition that cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Cosine of 25 degrees. You always have to say cosine of an angle, or cosine of an angle, or tangent of an angle. If you don't know the angle, then you would put whatever the angle was called, like up here, sine x. Or maybe if there was like an x in there, or another variable. But you got to put cosine of something. You don't just put cosine by itself. So cosine of 25 equals adjacent over hypotenuse. So that's equals x over 11. These are the ones where you cross multiply to solve. The first part of cross multiplying to solve is I put, and you definitely always have to set up this equation. Put this over 1. Then I'm going to cross multiply 11 times cosine 25 equals x times 1. This is the place where I'm always asking, is x alone yet? If x is alone, then I'm ready to put things into my calculator. On this one, x is alone. So it's 11 times cosine 25. And that's 9.9697. It says round to the nearest tenth. This one's a little bit tricky. If you take 9.96, the 6 tells me to round up. The next tenth up from 9.9 is 10.0. So this one, the rounding is a little weird, but it goes from 9.9 to 10.0 when I round. All right, number 8. Number 8 says that I have this angle 74, which has two sides. One of them is the hypotenuse, and one of them is the adjacent. So this is the hypotenuse. This is the adjacent, and this one I'm using adjacent and hypotenuse again, so that's cosine again. It's just a coincidence. So cosine of 74 equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Cross multiply 11 times cosine 74 equals x. X is by itself, so I'm ready to put it in my calculator. So 11 times cosine 74. I get 3.03. To the nearest tenth, that's 3.0. Let's look at another one. Goodness, this is another. Number 9 is also going to be cosine. Number 10 is going to be sine. Let me just show you how to set these up. Okay, don't watch if you haven't tried to do it yourself yet. This is how I would set these up. Oh, I'm so sorry. Number 10 is not the sine. That is the tangent, because x is opposite and 12 is adjacent. So there's number 10. Number 11, also the tangent. This is a good one. Tan 39 equals 13 over x. This is what I was looking for, is I wanted to get to one where the x is in the denominator. When the x is in the denominator, when I do my cross multiplying, I get x times tan 39 equals 13. Okay? By the way, if you need to see this labeled, here's how it would be labeled. X is not alone yet, so I still have to keep going. Divide both sides by tan 39. Tan 39. Now x is alone, and that means I'm ready to use the calculator. So I'm going to do 13 divided by tan 39. And I get 16.05, which is about 16.1. So that's my answer, 16.1. This one would be similar. Excuse that interruption.
Sponsor, it's time to leave campus. Students, if you're not with a teacher, coach, or sponsor, it's time to leave campus out the front doors or come in front of the gold gym immediately.
Okay, so this one would also have x in the denominator, so it would be very similar. All right, next we're going to get into 13 through 18, which is finding the missing angles.